What is going on here? I'm truly shocked. I'm horrified. I truly don't understand what is going on here. The most barbaric and wide-scale terror attack in decades, bigger than 9/11, was perpetrated 11 days ago, and it seems like this council has already forgotten. The pictures and footage from the October 7th pogrom are seared into my brain, Israeli's brain, forever. But it seems that I must remind some of you of what happened. Thousands of barbaric Hamas Nazis invaded Israel and brutally murdered 1,400 innocent Israelis as they slept, celebrated, hugged their families in fear, and cried for mercy. Some were raped, others beheaded, and some were burned alive while bound and gagged. Many were children, and hundreds were young people at a music festival. There were many paramedics, talking about medical teams, there were many paramedics who were murdered on their way to treat the wounded. Mothers who watched as their babies were slaughtered, and elderly Holocaust survivors who endured the Nazis only to be executed in their own living room. This was planned and carried out deliberately by the terrorists that rule Gaza today, as we speak. Not by accident, not by mistake, but deliberately. 200 innocents were violently taken hostage, many of which are nationals of your own countries. I read Hamas's charter aloud to you just 2 days ago. Hamas's words were not empty threats. Hamas's charter is their action plan. Their goal is the annihilation of Israel. And if Hamas has the opportunity to commit these atrocities again, they will, and you know it. Although there are some here that choose not to designate Hamas as a terror organization for political reasons, it still doesn't change the facts. Hamas deliberately targets civilians and massacres children when given the chance. This makes Hamas a terror organization, no different than ISIS. They do not believe in dialogue, they don't want a dialogue, not in political solutions. They only believe in exterminating Jews and annihilating the Jewish state. And nothing can change their genocidal ideology. They don't even recognize the existence of international law. To all those who are talking about two-state solution and international law, there is only one solution to curing a cancer, and it is the evisceration of every cancerous cell, just as was done with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Complete obliteration. This is the only way to ensure such atrocities will never be repeated. Nevertheless, look at what is going on here. 11 days after ISIS-like Hamas terrorists attempted to carry out another Jewish genocide, this council is not even focused on their heinous crimes. Up until today, you have not even done the most basic thing. You have not condemned, as a council, Hamas's brutal terror attack. It is really unfathomable. You cannot unite even on that basic thing. You are not focused on what needs to be done to free Gaza from Hamas and ensure that the oppression of the Gazan people by their tyrants ends. Instead, the Council is fixated only on humanitarian corridors and aid. These are important and noble causes, but they are certainly not a solution to prevent Hamas's next atrocious massacre. How is it possible that you are only dealing with resolutions like the one that was voted upon today? It's tragic to say, but this council is playing the exact role that Hamas was written for it in their script of death and terror. And I will explain. Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza 18 years ago. Hamas was then elected elected by the people of Gaza. I hear a lot that they do not represent them. Elected. And after murdering the Palestinian Authority officials by throwing them off rooftops, Hamas proceeded to convert every inch of the Gaza Strip to a war machine. Where was the council then? Where was the council when Hamas exploited the billions of dollars in international aid to embed terror infrastructure within and below densely populated residential areas? Where were you? Where was the UN? The UN knew all of this, but it remained silent. Hamas then spent the following 17 years terrorizing Israel by firing tens of thousands of rockets indiscriminately at Israeli towns and cities, while hiding behind their own civilians. Where has the council been? As we speak, right now, sirens are wailing. Millions in Israel are running to find shelters. Hamas does this so that once Israel strikes back, they can parade the bodies of the civilians in Gaza that they hid behind. Their strategy is to exploit their civilian casualties as propaganda, to leverage the international community to tie Israel's hands. Their goal is to increase civilian casualties in Gaza. This is part of their script. They know that they cannot beat Israel on the battlefield. Of course they know it. So they want to terrorize our citizens deliberately, only citizens, and then weaponize the UN to prevent Israel from obliterating them, so they can rebuild, rearm, and continue terrorizing Israelis. They have a lot of patience while working towards annihilating Israel, a lot of patience. This is Hamas's script. This is their playbook. And shockingly, even after the recent slaughter, it's still working for them. Do you not understand that just by holding this session with its focus, the Council is showing Hamas that they can fool everyone again and again and again? I reiterate, so far this Council has not even condemned Hamas for the atrocity it perpetrated, let alone held Hamas fully responsible for the situation in Gaza. But here we are, discussing humanitarian corridors. Does nobody else see how ludicrous this is? Calling for calm, restraint, and ceasefires is like putting a band-aid on a bullet wound. Such steps will not eradicate the cancer that is Hamas. Humanitarian corridors will not prevent the next atrocity. The only thing that will is the utter obliteration of this satanic entity. What are you doing to prevent this evil? Perhaps if for once the Council condemned Hamas, the people of Gaza would begin to comprehend the absolute destruction their leaders have brought upon them. Perhaps they would stand up to these barbaric savages. Yet every time the international community pressures Israel and attempts to tie our hands, it only serves to embolden these genocidal terrorists, increases their popularity, and ensure that this evil lives to see another day. Distinguished Council members, perhaps the most fundamental part of this issue is that some have still not internalized what Hamas truly is. This emergency session and the resolution voted upon were triggered, we all know it, by the propaganda of savage jihadists. Let that sink in. Claims made by baby-killing terrorists were accepted here and repeated today, by the way, at face value, without a second thought. And this is what triggered this session. Every piece of information that comes out of Gaza cannot be trusted. Hamas runs Gaza. Hamas runs all Gazans' institutions. So whatever comes out of the Strip is not the truth. It is what Hamas wants you to hear. Sadly, transparency and the truth are not central values for genocidal terrorists. In August 2022, Sarah Mascroft, the former head of office for OCHA in Gaza, tweeted a condemnation of the Palestinian Islamic Jihad for their indiscriminate rocket fire at Israeli civilians. August 2022, you can check. Almost immediately, Ms. Mascroft, the head of OCHA, was removed from her post and deleted her tweet. This made Israel very upset, obviously, so I asked her boss, I hope he's still with us, Under-Secretary General Griffith, why the UN would remove an official from their post for condemning acts of terror that deserve UN condemnation. Do you know what he told me? He said that Ms. Mascroft was transferred because, according to UN information and assessments, there was danger to her life. Danger to her life. If a UN official received death threats for telling the truth about the terrorists, try to imagine how any Gazan feels about telling the truth. Not only are official Gazan sources absolutely unreliable as they are terrorists, they would also be immediately murdered if they say something that Hamas doesn't like. So, distinguished council member, I have to ask you a question. What does this say about whoever decides to believe the claims of a terror organization without any fact-checking? The Al-Ahli hospital was hit by, and only by, a Palestinian Islamic Jihad rocket. What happened yesterday, including the tragic loss of life of civilians, was the sole fault of Hamas. Israel has lots of footage and even an audio recording from Palestinian Islamic Jihad terrorists to prove this beyond a fraction of a doubt. Nevertheless, the Secretary General and numerous UN officials immediately accepted the claims of baby-killing terrorists. What a disgrace. And today, some of you repeated these lies. How can the Secretary General forget that he has the obligation to verify the facts before issuing a condemnation? I guess it's easy when it comes to Israel. Mere months ago, the Secretary General himself signed off on a report detailing how the misfired rockets of Gazan terrorists killed and maimed dozens of Gazan children and medical personnel. We demand an apology. An apology. The UN and some on this council rush to adopt the lies of ISIS-like terrorists and refuse to accept the hard evidence of a law-abiding democracy. You should apologize. Apologize for never convening the council when Hamas rockets are fired deliberately at Israeli hospitals. Barzilai Hospital in Ashkelon was directly hit by a Hamas rockets just last week. Where was the council? Apologize for years of putting your heads in the ground while Hamas ceaselessly built up its war machine in Gaza. Distinguished council members, stop following Hamas's script. Stop playing by Hamas's rules. The time has come for this council to hold Hamas fully and solely accountable for the war crimes committed. This council should be purely focused on condemning the Hamas terrorists, supporting Israel's right to defend itself, and demanding from Hamas to immediately and unconditionally return our hostages. Israel's rescue mission can end very quickly if Hamas terrorists turn themselves in and release all of the hostages. But this rescue mission will not end until Israel ensures that Hamas atrocities can never be repeated again. And there is no way to ensure this other than the obliteration of Hamas's capabilities. Thank you, Mr. President.